This is Richard Escow with a special edition of the Zero Hour, an interview with my friend Alan Minsky. We're doing it this week because even though the program is on hiatus, we all have a very important decision and action coming up, of course, involving the election. And there's been a lot of discussion about some things that Alan has said recently I thought should be brought to your attention, as well as some thoughts and questions I had. Alan Minsky is the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. He also does radio work, as do I. And he has a piece in Common Dreams, came out a couple days ago, entitled "No Person of Conscience Can Sit Out This Midterm Election." And since this, of course, is something we all wrestle with, I wanted to have a conversation with him about it and be able to share it with you before Election Day. So without any further ado, Alan Minsky, welcome back to the Zero Hour.
It's great to be with you, RJ. Thank you.
So let's get right into it. Why did you feel the need to write this article in the first place? Let's start there.
Well, in any given election, especially in recent American election cycles, there's been a lot at stake. And there's something very distinctive about this election cycle. And that is that we have a very slim majority for the Democrats in both houses of Congress, and they have the White House with Joe Biden. And they did pursue an agenda that I was surprised at how decent it was in the 117th Congress, the current Congress. However, there were many things they were unable to act on. And at the end of the term, we have a situation in which, over the past 2 years, the overreach politically has not been by, oddly, the incumbent party that holds both houses of Congress, slim majority, and the presidency, but by the opposition. What do I mean by that? Well, the reaction to the election of 2020 produced an avalanche of anti-democratic measures being produced across the country in state houses by the Republican Party, where they have the majority there. These are now in effect and will impact the voting in this election, okay? And on top of that, the Supreme Court made a very historic ruling reversing what was established law for more than a half century with Roe v. Wade, okay? And actually 49 years, so half century. And with those two occurrences, you have a Republican Party that is the whole counteroffensive against the civil rights movement is coming to fruition. Laws are being established that are restricting the rights of Americans to participate in the democracy and returning us right close to the Jim Crow era in states where Republicans control things. And then, of course, we have the very notion of our being a society of equals being reversed, because now, look, as a man, there is no realm in which anybody says to me what I can do with my body on decisions that would be of the utmost importance for my life going forward. This is now not the case for women in our society, okay? So what can Congress do about one thing that came from a collection of states and the other from a Supreme Court ruling? Well, the actions by those states is predicated upon a 2013 Supreme Court ruling called Shelby versus Alabama, which basically said we don't have any use for the central components of the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
So the 1965 Civil Rights Act?
Voting Rights Act.
A Voting Rights Act, okay.
Rights Act, right. So that reversed effectively preclearance. It's what says that the states can't act without getting approval by the Department of Justice in terms of a set of states that previously had clearly restricted the right to vote for particularly African Americans. And the Republicans have used it in very targeted ways since that. And now, following the 2020 election, are just going to town. The Brennan Center has report after report on legislation being passed that is restricting and limiting the capacity to vote in states controlled by Republican legislatures, okay? This is perverting our democracy. We clearly have an appetite in the Republican Party to take it even further, which is apparent from the big lie. It's even apparent from their embrace of, political figures around the world like Viktor Orban in Hungary and other what they call like authoritarian, democratically elected or a liberal democracy is, I think, Orban's term, to bring that to the United States and to try to create a scenario where the Republican Party is going to win elections, even if the majority of the people in the electorate are not supporting it. This is an agenda for the Republican Party. Now, I'm going on a little bit too long here. The point is simple. The Democratic Party is committed in this election, if they hold the House and they add 2 Senate seats, to passing legislation that will reaffirm the 1960s Voting Rights Act and will codify Roe v. Wade. Okay, that is what is specific about this election. Those will be hammer blows against the 60, 70-year counteroffensive that the right wing has been involved in against the civil rights movement and against all of the changes in society that were brought about by second wave feminism. And with these acts, we will reaffirm American democracy and reaffirm that we are a society of equals. And again, it will be a hammer blow against this reactionary right offensive against democracy and equality in this country. That can only happen when the Democrats control both houses of Congress and they have enough votes in the Senate willing to have a filibuster carve-out to pass those pieces of legislation. Currently, only 48 of the Democrats do. Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin refuse to support the filibuster carve-out. So we need to gain 2 Senate seats and hold on to the House majority. We will achieve things that will be so important for the maintenance of America as a democratic society that they cannot be overstated. And I will take anybody on who is willing to debate me on this. And if they think they're progressive, or if they even are just an independent who believes that America needs to remain a democratic society, it is incumbent upon you to go out and vote for your Democrat in your House race and in your Senate race this election. If you don't, quite frankly, and I'm not here to shame people, but quite frankly, don't come to me and complain about it. I mean, yes, I will go forward always positively from the day we're talking onwards and say what we need to do to reestablish a strong democracy and a society of equals. But don't kid yourself. This is an opportunity, and it is an opportunity that has to be taken right now, because in the next federal election cycle, the Democrats have to defend 23 Senate seats and the Republicans only 10. The opportunity to pick up enough votes to create a filibuster carve-out, it's almost non-existent in 2024. So you're talking 4 years where Roe is not the law of the land. You're talking 4 years where the state legislatures, Republican-controlled, can continue to do damage to our democracy in an environment where illiberal democracy and the authoritarian right is stronger than we ever imagined possible in our lifetimes, okay? So this is an essential election to get out and vote, and there's no excuse not to vote Democratic if you claim to be a person who supports democracy and equality for all peoples, and of course, women to control their own bodies.
Okay, well, let's break some of those apart, okay? Bearing in mind that the people who will be listening to us talking right now are primarily of the left, and that term, has many meanings, as we know, but primarily politically left, very left, democratic socialist left. That's where I reside. Bernie was my boss for a year or two, and I feel very strongly about certain positions that are well to the left of the Democratic Party. I left the Democratic Party for a number of years, when I returned, it was after moving to the East Coast, specifically to Maryland, and my friend Ben Jealous was running for governor, wanted to vote in the primary. I used to say that, I'm in the Democratic Party the way Thoreau said he was in the world, in it but not of it, right? And there are a lot of people like me, okay? And I do plan to vote Democratic, but I also, how do I put this? I get it. I don't think that leftists who don't want to vote for the Democrats are immoral. I don't think they lack conscience. I don't think they're, fools. I know a lot of intelligence, but I think they're wrong. Okay, that's the main thing.
I question that on conscience, Richard. I think seriously, with Roe on the ballot, you're talking about in just 4 years' time, thousands of women's lives will be lost. Okay. They ain't going to be rich women. Okay. They're largely going to be women of color. And many thousands more are going to have their bodies harmed egregiously because they're going to be seeking desperate procedures because in their states, and they'll be isolated in states where they will not have the right to control their own bodies. So just on that front, I question whether we can just take conscience off the table here. And then secondarily, look, I understand the frustrations with the Democratic Party. I live them every day. Okay. I was a diehard Bernie supporter. There's so many episodes from the two Sanders campaigns, let alone everything else about the rise of the progressive left over the last 5 to 6 years, the efforts of the mainstream of the Democratic Party to suffocate it, that I could cite. I bet you I could get up to 250 instances off the top of my head. And I'm disgusted by every one of them. Okay. Nobody lives this more than the people at PDA. We are the folks that drafted Bernie Sanders to run as a Democrat. Did we think he'd be as successful as he was in his challenge to Hillary Clinton? No, but we knew something was there that was going to catch. We thought it would catch fire. We didn't think it would go as big as it did, but it went big, and it changed American politics. And so, did we think the Democratic Party would fight it if it got big? Of course, we didn't think it was necessarily going to get that big. But yeah, we're not that surprised by it. We understand the institutional structures of American society that inform the mainstream of the Democratic Party, and yet they're rotten to the core. But here's the thing. We live inside a two-party system, and you don't have to be Napoleon Bonaparte or any other strategic genius to recognize that if there are two parties, and one of the two parties has the base, the majority, overwhelming majority of the base support for that party supports the policies that we as progressives support, we're a lot closer to winning political power inside a two-party system than if we start bifurcating into separate political tendencies outside of the Democratic Party. If you want social change along the order of turning America into a socially just society, the fight is inside the Democratic Party. Now, that's a bigger argument because we're talking about the election right now.
Yeah, but let me break out for a second. Let me interrupt you for a second, Alan, and break out a couple different issues here. And I think it's important that we talk this through because, frankly, both of us are going to be making the same case to do the same thing in the coming days. And then some variant of it, I strongly suspect, in the future. But I'll push back a little on the conscience thing, and here is why. I know people who interpret the facts differently. And so they have deep consciences, but they, frankly, not enough people have spoken to them. And I definitely do not include you in this, but not enough. The Democratic Party institutionally has a habit of speaking to leftists of conscience who are not members of the party in a contemptuous and dismissive way. And that, I think, is counterproductive. I think you talk to people, frankly, mainstream Democrats have a tendency to talk to Republicans, despite what an extremist outfit that party is, with more respect, Republican voters, than they do to, let's say, Green Party voters, and who are just the object of their rage. We could go on for hours about why that is and how that came to be. But so I guess my only point is, I see people struggling. I don't think it's a matter of conscience. I think it's a matter of despair, Alan. I think it's a matter of people thinking, the Democrats, they've lied again and again, promised to do this, promised to do that. Now they're promising to do all this great stuff when if we can just give them Congress back, they've let us down. They've kept us from fighting for more radical change. Now, I disagree. I feel that the route to more political revolution, as Bernie would say, lies through, creating the fertile fields for it, right? And to do that, we have to protect democracy. That's where I come from. And the Republicans are a direct threat to democracy. The Democrats have had their little shenanigans too, but the Republicans are, as you say, part of this authoritarian worldwide movement. And you think they've been bad so far. and I think they've been anti-democratic for at least 50 years, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to what they're about to unfold if they get Congress. But I just feel that the argument that needs to be made is one that says this system is broken. We get it. A lot of people in charge of the Democratic Party, within the Democratic Party, are part of a broken system. And I don't even condemn them for that, because they made, I think they're wrong, or they were right at the time and they're wrong now. But I think that, they made the decision that the way to win is to raise big money. You raise big money by going to Wall Street, therefore you have to back off, multiply that 100%. But I think that the way to defeat that institutional force that, along with, I'll say it, fascism has infiltrated the Republican Party, but has also, the institutional side of it has also infiltrated the Democratic Party. The way to beat that is by protecting and expanding the tattered democratic rights we have, and by, as you say, taking the Democratic Party over. I mean, you didn't use those words, but to me, I think of the Democratic Party as a bus. I don't want to break it apart and take the wheels off it and leave it rusting in a field. I want to throw the driver out and have us be driving it. But anyway, now I've gone on too long, but I guess I would just say, I don't think it's a matter of conscience. I think a lot of people have just lost hope that the electoral system will give them what we need.
Let's also be clear. Look, if you're going to sit out the election in a state where there's not even a Senate race, because I suppose there are 17 states that don't have Senate races this time, okay, that might be fine if you don't live in a House swing district. I mean, what's important, really, is in about 50 different House swing districts across the country, and there are 435 districts, maybe 60 or 70, you got to get out and vote. And if you live in one of about 9 states, which are swing Senate seats, you got to get out and vote. Okay. So, there it's really, I think, I would say it's, especially if you're listening, I'm certainly appealing to your conscience to get out and vote. If you don't think that the Republicans are serious about restricting voting rights to imbalance the playing field, look, read the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Read the electoral components of the For the People Act. Then go to the Brendan Setter website and look at what Republicans are doing. There is no comparison between the two of them. Look, internally, the Democratic Party has been running a pretty corrupt game against progressives. That's clear. We have a lot of examples of that in the 250 things I could check as to ways in which they've imbalanced the playing field against progressives inside the party. It's something we're going to have to overcome. But guess what, folks? If you look at, just say, the Bernie Sanders platform from 2020. Okay, we always are proud of saying that most of those policy positions have majority support in the general public. You know what their level of support is among Democratic voters? It's really high. Okay. Yeah. Now, there are reasons why arguments like viability get used. It's also the fact that the Democratic moderates have more money than the progressives overwhelmingly. They, of course, hold many more incumbencies than the progressives do, that they keep getting reelected, and the progressives are more marginal. We've picked up seats this time. It's still not where the point where the really core progressives are challenging to be a majority of the House caucus or the Senate caucus, but we're making inroads there. But when you look at the policy positions, we are the majority tendency within the Democratic Party ranks. That's a powerful position to hold. I want to say one other thing.
That's a great point. And by the way, the only data point, the first data point that comes to mind is in 20 primaries in the year 2020. Polls show that a majority of Democrats in every single primary supported Medicare for all.
Oh, yeah. In some of the states Bernie lost by the most amount, they had some of the highest support for Medicare for all.
Right.
And in fact, the politicians that in the legacy manner Clyburn can call on from the Clinton-Obama lineage, they're running out of names. I mean, for instance, people float Pete Buttigieg as a presidential candidate. Clyburn's not going to be able to throw his backing behind Buttigieg versus either Bernie or the next Bernie-esque candidate, and there's going to be traction for that candidate. There is simply no relationship that's been developed there in the way that the Clintonites and people from the Obama, like Biden, had. So we have a real opening within the Democratic Party. Okay, that's later. Back to 2022. Actually, no, let me make one other broader point. There are three political movements right now that are vying for power in this country, okay? And the progressives are one of them. Following Bernie Sanders effectively taking third place, and a strong third place, in 2 consecutive presidential cycles, the progressives are on the stage of American politics. There's the Trumpian right wing, there's the neoliberal center running from the Romney wing of the Republican Party through the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, and they're the progressives. Neoliberalism is basically, as far as winning elections, an exhausted ideology. Now, don't get me wrong, we have all of the rules and regulations of our society structured around the way the economy and society has been organized the last 40 years, largely in a neoliberal model. But we've had 40 years of now this example, and we know where it leads. It leads to all the wealth going to the wealthy, public services being underfunded, and basically the majority of the population living in insecure lives with great precarity and struggling to make ends meet. It is not a popular position to hold. Then there's the Trumpian right, and then there's the progressive left. Only one of the three positions promises a way out of the social and political crisis that our country is so clearly immersed in right now. Nobody on earth believes that the Trumpian right is going to create social unity. The neoliberals are an exhausted and failed ideology. There's only one of the three groups that promises a way forward that says we're going to have social cohesion. We're going to whether you want to call it patriotism or just the fact that we want to live in a society where we're working all together in a way that makes life better for us. Only the progressive movement has that. Again, a phenomenally powerful position to hold in a society. And right now, the institutional way to empower that is through the Democratic Party. Okay, back to 2022 and a question of conscience. Okay, I really do think that people have to recognize that for what it's worth, the Democratic Party has promised, and you asked this question, that they will do these filibuster carve-outs to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and codify Roe v. Wade. Now, on the issue that is also so pressing in this election above every other issue, I mean, obviously we have the environment, things like student debt. Look, on student debt and in the environment, it's night and day, okay? There's no difference. No Republican is supporting relief on student debt, right, or relief on the cost of college. Democrats as a party position are now, okay? On the environment, one believes in science, the other doesn't. That's night and day. Inflation, I'll get to in a second. But on these two matters that I have foregrounded in my essay and I am foregrounding now, Kamala Harris has even promised that she will oversee as the head of the Senate, right, with the Democratic majority. If they hold the majority, the House passes the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act again, and the legislation to codify Roe v. Wade. She has said that she will oversee and guarantee she will oversee with 52 senators the passage of that legislation. Now, I will certainly come back on this show and any platform in the world and eat crow if those marks are hit and that does not happen, okay? I've even done my due diligence. I called the appropriate Senate offices to make sure that 47 senators are committed to that. Why 47? Patrick Leahy retired, and we know Sinema and Manchin do not support it. Then I have called the 5 Senate campaigns that have a chance of winning and gaining seats, and those are in Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida, and all of them are committed to a filibuster carve-out to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and codify Roe v. Wade. So this is a party commitment. Promises have been made. This is unique that they're doing this. And by the way, it also strengthens democracy further because these are directly taking on an autocratic and politically motivated Supreme Court. It is saying the laws of the land are created by Congress, elected by the people, and we're not going to cede this territory to the Supreme Court. So this is a Democratic Party doing what it failed to do in recent years. And the failures are embarrassing and real. Obama promised to do it, and he shrugged it off once he was elected, and he certainly had the majority to codify Roe v. Wade. That's on his conscience. Just as much as I think a vote, if you're in a swing state or a swing House district, will be on your conscience. I really think people have to be, to a degree, have their feet held to the fire on this. If you're an individual voter, I mean, do you support a woman's right to choose? If you don't, sit at home. Don't vote. But if you do, don't lie to yourself that there's nothing that can be done here. And please, if you don't believe me, call all those Senate offices. if you want the shortcut, you talk to Dick Durbin's office. Dick Durbin is the whip in the Senate, and he can tell you that the 47 will go for it. Though I even checked beyond that affirmation. So this is real this time. They know they messed up, and they also know that the Trumpian threat against democracy. By the way, why did Obama not act? And you know this too, Richard, because you know Washington. The dirty secret always is that the Republicans were supposedly never really going to act on Roe v. Wade. Not to excuse Obama. There was no reason not to codify Roe v. Wade. And Roe gets criticized, but I think it's a sound approach to legalizing abortion and giving women a right to choose, because, the viability point is very clear and stated in Roe in a way that really, I think, makes sense to most people. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, you hear in the debates across the country, the getcha moment that the Republicans are trying to have is, oh, you would terminate an 8-month-old, 8-month pregnancy. And of course, that's not what Roe allows. Viability means, can the baby live outside the body of the mother?
Right.
And then that's where pretty much you don't go beyond in Roe. And that seems like a common sense approach to it, where we are politically in the country and where we have vast majority support is with viability included. And that's where we can go to protect a woman's right to choose in our society right now. And so I think that's wise, and that's what the legislation will say. And also the Republican Supreme Court will be put on blast by those acts of Congress, and they'll be notified that no, this overreach, this political overreach by the courts, this whole era of it, by they called the courts that produced the civil rights legislation, et cetera, activist courts. We've never had activist courts like this before in the United States, not that we've seen over the last 2 years.
No, it's dictatorial. I would call it a dictatorial court. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I think they've used that method, the far right. They've been planning to use it for many years. They've done it.
Can I
At this,
one more point?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Look, democracy. What are we protecting with democracy? Okay. In the article, I spend the whole final third of the article saying that I think the attack on democracy is occurring in the context of a tremendous degree of wealth inequality in the society, and that is at the root of the attacks on democracy. If you wonder why the ruling class acquiesced to the expansions of democracy in the eras that it did after World War II, well, the middle class was really the dominant political operation in the United States until you get to Reaganism in the 1980s and neoliberalism. And so we have incredible wealth inequality in the United States, and that has to be rectified. Okay, how are we going to rectify it? In this society, in our country, short of revolution, which you're deluding yourself if you think there's an appetite for a kind of, Bolshevik type revolution in the United States. It doesn't exist. It's not going to happen. You're in fantasy land if you're thinking that is going to happen. Okay, so back to reality. How does it happen? It happens through our democratic process. So the only way that we rectify these issues is through democracy. If we lose our democracy, if we allow the Republicans to steal our democracy from us, there's no way back economically. And we have 4 years where they're going to be absolutely chipping away at the operation of democracy in state after state after state in this country. And we have an opportunity to stop that short right now by electing the 52 senators and the House majority, passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Don't take, my shaming people to be the reason for doing this. Read the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, see what it does, understand what it does, and recognize that provides the primary instrument that preserves it for us addressing not just civil rights, but also economic inequality in our society. The New Deal was the product of economics, a product of democracy, of legislation. The labor movement requires support from laws we pass by Congress. So it is our democracy that opens up the opportunity for progressive social change.
There's one last objection that I see, and I make it clear whenever I can in my own writing, but I think throws a lot of people on the left when you or I talk about preserving democracy in this vote. And it's this, and I think a lot of voters as well struggle with this. A lot of times the way mainstream Democrats present it what they really seem to be saying is in the good old days when democracy worked, before Trump, before 2016. And a lot of leftists will say it hasn't worked. It's only partly worked at best throughout American history, and it's been dying for decades. And a lot of ordinary voters will say, it ain't working for me. So, your nostalgia, Mr. Democrat, not you, but I mean, I'm talking about, Mr. or Ms. Democrat at the top of the ticket, for the days when you could sit down with John Kasich or Newt Gingrich with a beer and work at all that. F that, because I didn't get anything out of that. So a lot of times I think the mistake, I don't know if it might not be a mistake in the case of the neoliberals in both parties, but the mistake in terms of reaching the people we're talking about reaching is to say, they immediately have heard save democracy as mean save the crappy system we had before the even crappier system we're getting now. And I think it's important to help people understand. And I'll add one other thing. The historian Louis L. Gould, who is maybe the preeminent historian of the Republican Party in this country, his 2003 book on the Republican Party, I used this quote recently in an article. He says, and he's not an ideologue, Karl Rove consulted with him, but he says, since McKinley, the Republican Party has not believed in the Democratic Party the Republican Party has believed that it has a natural right to rule, and that everything it's done since then reflects that. This is what the good old days of 2003, 2 years after George W. Bush stole an election. So I guess all I'm saying is, a lot of people are saying, what? So George W. Bush, who stole an election, gives Michelle and Obama a piece of candy, and now we're supposed to think things were great. Things were lousy. They're just going to get a lot lousier. You think you've seen lousy, pal. You ain't seen lousy yet. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay, I mean, again, the proposal on the table from PDA and from DSA, as I understand it, or at least Jacobin Magazine wing of DSA, and Bernie Sanders, is to win through the democratic process what amounts to social democracy, a new deal, fully inclusive new deal. So not with the exclusions, the racist exclusions that did exist in the 30s. Or even democratic socialism. And clearly, money in politics does need to be, to say reformed, it doesn't even go far enough. It needs to be largely eliminated from its influence. All of that is what we seek to achieve, and nothing less than it, through the democratic process. We don't see any route to achieving it except through the American democratic process. We think that through the fact that we still have an open society, and while the mainstream media is still sort of dominant in terms of the political discourse in the country, we now see some very powerful avenues to get our message across that can, go around the major corporations' control of media. We can build our own media. We have incredible energy. The amount of energy that was there in this 2016 and 2020 Sanders campaign, we think is a latent force that can be mobilized in American society, and through the democratic process, win enough elections to change America in the direction that I just outlined, which would be a much more equitable society. I don't think anybody, including the Jacobin wing of DSA, are proposing to the general public that we're going to eliminate market structures entirely or capitalism per se. But we also do believe that if we achieve something along the lines of a social democracy, we can look out from that platform and see other ways we can try to improve society in ways that are equitable, fair, just, etc. So none of that, even long-term visionary aspects of life, are off the table. But we have an American public that hasn't given up on democratic participation. You wouldn't have seen the amount. Look, we just actually came off the election with the largest participation rate I think we basically ever seen.
What was that?
We basically just came off the election with the largest participation rate we've ever seen. I mean,
Right.
mainly motivated by fear of the great orange beast, right? But still, the Sanders component and the amount of youth energy that generated was unlike anything we've seen since the late 1960s in the country around electoral politics. And we definitely have a young generation whose politics seem broadly to be social democratic, New Deal-esque, and even democratic socialists certainly seems to be if not the main tendency, a major tendency, and one that seems to be persuasive in arguments across the generation. So we have reason to be hopeful for democratic process, and we can't see it suffocated. And I think people are naive if they don't think that's the gambit of the contemporary Republican Party. And it goes back to shenanigans they've been pulling for a long time. In fact, it's part of the undying shame of the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. They didn't call it out until the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump result. Just as the Hillary Clinton camp was getting off suffocating democracy inside the Democratic Party. So.
And when they did call it out, all they called out was the Russians at first, and I would say exaggerated that. I'm not saying the Russians did nothing, but I wrote a piece in early 2017 called, while Democrats chase Russians, Republicans keep stealing democracy, because it's been so. But finally, though, I'm very happy to see that the Democrats are taking on the issue of democracy, and in the last year or two at least have begun to take it very seriously. I guess I'll make my closing argument. Let's make our closing arguments.
And I can make one point just on that, which is actually, I've been very dismayed with the mainstream of the Democratic Party. We've had Rovember as a major, tagline. We finally got them, after Bernie's chiding for them to address economics directly. Democracy's been a minor point being made. And I do know we've been working very closely in PDA with activists on the ground in Georgia and North Carolina, and we can sense their frustration with national democratic messaging not highlighting democracy.
Yeah, and they're afraid. They're being led by the polls rather than leading the debate. The polls are telling them voters don't care. Voters on both sides are concerned about democracy, but for Republicans, it's the steal. They're saying that issue doesn't sell. Well, it would sell if you told them, if you told the people exactly what's going on. If you didn't couch it in high-flown language. Listen, Alan, we could go on forever. The fact that the two impeachments of Trump did not focus. The first one had nothing to do with stealing democracy. The second one only tangentially, in a way. The fact that they personalize a threat to democracy in the being of Trump, when to me Trump is a symptom as much as a cause. I mean, we could go on about this, at length, but to me, my argument to my fellow leftists, I guess there's at least one specific and one broad, right? My article for the American Prospect was on the fact that all three candidates to run Ways and Means, the House Ways and Means Committee, Republican candidates, if the Republicans win, have said they will privatize Social Security. All three of them. And all three of them have said and so has Kevin McCarthy, also as the likely Speaker of the House, that they are likely to use the debt limit ceiling, take it hostage, in order to force cuts to Social Security and Medicare. That alone, because you know what? I don't have a cosmic vision for social transformation that I'm so sure of that I'm willing to sacrifice millions of seniors and disabled people because I think I have a cosmic vision of the next 50 years. So that's my concrete, one of my, and you've named several others, Roe v. Wade, John Lewis Act. So that's the specific.
Action to legislative level on the environment too.
On the environment, absolutely. It won't be enough, but it'll be something. But on a tactical level, my last word, and then I'll give you the last word. My last word to, my comrades is, hey, you don't have to love the Democrats to vote for them. All you have to do is see that strategic strategically, it's the right move to lay the ground. First of all, some good things will happen. We'll still be, in my view, on a fast train to catastrophe, which is why the show is called the 0 Hour, but it will lay the groundwork for the rest of us to push even deeper political transformation, because we won't be able to do that once we lose our democracy. And then the final thing, based on polling and everything else, as you said, people have had it with the neoliberal consensus. They hate it. They should hate it. It's failed them. It's failed the planet. And if we don't keep fighting within this structure to offer a left populist consensus that meets people's needs, then the only thing left for people is either to surrender or to turn to the far right, because they're the only ones that are going to talk about this stuff if we walk off the field. So that's my, I'm sorry, my voice broke, but that's my closing pitch. What's yours?
Well, I just returned to the fact of the imbalanced playing field that the election will be on in 2024. If in states like, Georgia and Arizona and Wisconsin, that, right, those three states were the reason that Biden was elected over Trump. And it was a difference of 40,000 votes, I think. And if those states are lost to the Republican Party, then and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is not passed, we are really seriously looking at the loss of our democracy in this country. And the capacity to deal a hammer blow against the American right and have the Democratic Party, for all of its failings, which are very real along the moderate wing of the party and its embrace of neoliberalism, to embrace our democracy in the manner that those two acts will do, plus the codification of Roe v. Wade, I think will reestablish and reaffirm not just democracy here in the United States, but around the world. And I do think that a democracy is in look what happened in Brazil this past week. Yes, Lula won. It's great. He won by less than 2% of the vote.
Right.
And by the way, apparently with massive vote suppression. Here is the right wing crying that it was a fraudulent election when there's evidence, right, of militias keeping people from voting in Lula strongholds across the north of the country.
Right.
And again, we have Viktor Orban, we have Vladimir Putin, we have the election of neo-fascists in Sweden, in Italy. Democracy needs a boost, folks. And democracy means we live in a society of equals. And that's not what the Republican Party is about right now. And this is an opportunity to achieve that. So a record number of Americans were mobilized to vote for a negative reason in 2018 and 2020. And that was to vote against Donald Trump. This time, there is something positive on the table. Yes, it's a check on the power and a vote against the Republicans. But again, fulfilling the civil rights movement, protecting the civil rights movement, protecting equality for women, protecting the right for autonomy of our own bodies. These are positive achievements. And when the Democratic Party, for all of its failings, makes these kind of positive achievements, it actually strengthens the hands of the progressive movement inside the Democratic Party. And the progressive movement inside the Democratic Party, lastly, I will say, is something everybody who is on the left should get involved and support. Judith Whitmer, who is now the head of the Democratic Party in Nevada, is a national hero of the First Order. And is she under attack by the moderates? Yes. And if you're not, you're not aware of that, look into it, folks. And if you're in Nevada, get out there and support Judith. Same with Selena Vickers in West Virginia. Same with Amar Shargil in California. There is a movement inside the Democratic Party built upon the Bernie Sanders movement to take the damn party over for the people. I call it a friendly takeover with hostile expulsions. Do I belong in the same party as Jamie Dimon? Hell no way. He belongs in the Tory party, and all his damn money should be in the Tory party. And the Democratic Party should be for the elimination of money in politics entirely and the renewal of democracy in America fully. And that's what I'm fighting for, and nothing less. Social democracy in America, best public schooling in the world, same student-teacher ratios as you have in the best private schools in the country for every public school in the country, free college tuition, all of that across the board. We're a rich enough society to achieve it. And that's what we have to push for. We can put, and the way that the American people are poised to achieve it is through our democracy. Even beyond money and politics, are there anti sort of small d democratic measures written into the US Constitution? Yes. But even if it's structured, as long as there's not blocks on election, we can achieve great things through the democratic process because people recognize this is what's best for the society. We can win that argument. We need a level playing field to achieve it. Now is a time that we can secure that for generations going forward.
Well said. Okay, so Alan Minsky, where can people go to get more information about your organization?
Progressive Democrats of America, folks. And yes, pdamerica.org. Our Twitter account is at pdamerica. Same thing on all social medias. And that's 1A, so PD America, and then pdamerica.org is the website. Thank you, as always, RJ Eskow. Great show.
Great talking with you, Alan Minsky. And I was going to say we'll be right back after this because that's what I always do in my interviews, but we're not going to be right back because this is a special interview. So thanks again. This has been Richard R.J. Eskow with Alan Minsky of Progressive Democrats for America. Thanks for listening.